Welcome everyone to our Survive and Thrive digital dives. It's 12 Tuesdays, and I'm Rachel Perkins, the Education Outreach Specialist for Texas Oncology Foundation. If you are a cancer patient, a caregiver, or professional and just want to educate yourself about the cancer world, we invite you to subscribe and join us every Tuesday for the next 10 weeks. We are so glad to have you guys here with us today, and we get to hear from Karen Smith and Nicole Hodak, and they will be discussing embracing nutrition this holiday season. Now, I get the joys of doing a little bit of a foundation intro before we do some housekeeping on Zoom, so here it goes. The Texas Oncology Foundation is dedicated to providing support to cancer patients through the communities where they live, work, and receive treatment. Through Survive and Thrive programming, the foundation can provide educational events and resources to help build community connections and support all affected by cancer. Just a little bit of housekeeping for Zoom. In the recording, only you can see and hear us. We will edit out in the recording so that we won't see or hear any of you attending. The chat is open for you to communicate through, and I actually suggest putting in where you're listening from now. If you're having any technical difficulties, the best solution is to typically exit and rejoin the webinar session. If you experience audio issues, you can always dial in and listen from a phone line. The dial-in option is provided on the registration confirmation email you received directly from Zoom. If you have any questions, feel free to submit your questions and comments at any time during this webinar. Simply type them in the chat tab. And if you're viewing along with others at your site, please designate a scribe to submit your group's questions. We do plan to respond to questions at the end of this presentation. Any questions that I'm unable to answer, I will forward on to our speakers. Now, we are recording this webinar, and the online archive will be available for viewing after the live version. The recording will be sent to everyone in a follow-up email and will be available on our Texas Oncology Foundation website. Now, I had the absolute pleasure of introducing our presenters today. We have Karen Smith, who is a board-certified specialist in oncology nutrition with over 20 years of practice. She has a Master's of Science degree in nutrition education and has practiced in academic and community practices. Her research interests have been integrative nutrition and quality improvements in nutrition care. She is a gem in the oncology nutrition space. And we also have Nicole Hodak, who is a board-certified specialist on oncology nutrition with nearly 15 years of experience in clinical nutrition. She focuses on creating personalized nutrition plans to support cancer patients using current research to enhance treatment outcomes and quality of life. Nicole's approach combines evidence-based practices with compassionate care to address each patient's unique needs. Now, we are so excited to hear from you, ladies. Go ahead and share your screen and we will get started.
Well, thank you so much. This is great. I'm glad we are embracing your nutrition this holiday season. Thank you so much for putting this together with me, and we're excited to be here for the Texas Foundation and this digital dive. Some information about us, but I'll just mention I'm Karen Smith. I'm the manager of clinical nutrition here at Texas Oncology, and I am joined by Nicole Hodak, who is one of our dietitians in the Central and South Texas region. And I, for one, am actually really glad we're doing this because I am just preparing for the holiday season myself and can use some of these tips just like anyone else.
Absolutely. And the season is such, it can be a big spectrum of emotions and feelings for people. And one of the most important things that I continue to try and communicate is just how we can honor nutrition, but also honoring the comfort and the season and nostalgia or the feelings perhaps of grief that might come up during the season. And just giving some tips on how to kind of come to the middle with what our recommendations are on a day-to-day basis, but integrating that into a season that can feel so different.
Absolutely. And we're doing this today is actually at sunset is Rosh Hashanah. So I wanted to kind of just reflect that we are presenting this from kind of a Western Christian calendar standpoint, where the holidays start around Thanksgiving and go through the new year, but many other cultures and many other groups have different holiday seasons and cadences, and some people are already right in the middle of it, and some people may have more of a spring new year. So we hope these tips will be useful no matter where in the calendar cycle you celebrate.
Absolutely. That's a great point. And so we're going to go through, each of our slides is going to have one of the nutrition recommendations, thereabouts. And then we're going to have some power-packed foods for the holiday menu, as well as strategy to keep your intentions, whatever they may be, at the front of mind. And so our first one is staying physically active.
I love this one. I love that we're starting with it too.
Karen, you're actually one of the people that really encourages me to keep moving in a lot of areas of my life. So I'm curious, how do you encourage others to stay moving?
Yep. There are a lot of different ways. Throughout the years, I've certainly tried to work in physical activity to my overall day schedule. If I can walk places, I do love walking places. That's not as well, especially it's been so hot here in the summer, it's been hard to walk really outside. So hopefully as we get a little bit cooler, we'll be able to do a little bit more walking, even for those like 10, even 5-minute windows, even getting outside and taking a walk around the block is a great break. Um, I have been a big fan lately of these really short workout videos. There's so many online. The one I guess I've been kind of looking at a lot is this woman named Lucy Wyndham Reed, who's from the UK. Actually, I like her English accent, but she has a lot of really short 5-7 minute workout videos that are very accessible. And she is a certified physical trainer, so I feel pretty comfortable recommending her videos.
Well, that's
What
great.
about you?
Trying to make some of the movements that we typically do in our days a little more spicy, if you will. So
Yeah.
I think we've talked or have heard a lot about these step kind of guidelines or rules. And while that can be helpful if that's where you are in terms of energy or intensity for folks, just being mindful that the guidelines at 150 minutes a week at least, we want that to be somewhat intentional. So if you're in a space where you can safely have your heart slightly elevated or perspiring, I'm telling folks to the stuff that they're doing already, make that a little more intentional. So if it's dancing while you're in the kitchen or vacuuming the home, some of those things, that's really where I'm encouraging folks to try and take some of those opportunities to make that more intentional. And
I
then,
also really like the idea about that you have on here about including some celebratory activity in your holiday planning. And that was what I was doing this morning, was getting out my calendar and looking at, what actually are we doing for the next 3 months, and where can we fit in either maybe like a turkey trot around Halloween or Thanksgiving, or can we do some of these like walking tours?
yeah, or serving others in our community,
Yes.
right? So those turkeys around Thanksgiving are pretty heavy.
They are.
So if that's something that someone's capable of doing, it's definitely a great way to try and serve or give back. So, and it's still active. So double win.
Yes.
And then also I included on here staying positive about efforts. So there's actually a lot of research on this. If we believe that we are doing good things for our body, sometimes the outcomes that we'll see in the literature are exponentiated if the person believes that they're actually doing something positive for their body. So just would encourage folks to actually stay positive about the things that they are capable of doing and that they are doing on a day-to-day basis. So
Perfect. Yep.
this is a tough one.
Yes. The I've been, as I mentioned before, I was looking at Rosh Hashanah, and it's traditional to do apple and honey for the sweet New Year, which I thought was a, just an interesting tradition, but also just acknowledging that sweets are usually a part of the holiday season. So planning for them and looking at places that you really want to maybe be intentional with the treats that you're going to have, and trying to cut back in other places where it's not as important.
Absolutely. And we don't have a whole slide dedicated to alcohol, but sometimes that's a celebratory beverage. And so, we say trying to keep that under 3 drinks a week, or if you're a female, 1 a day or 2 for men, just depending on where you are in your moderation. But Lots of mocktail recipes that are available out there. And this is the season for those aromatics like cinnamon
Yes.
and orange rind and that sort of thing. So would definitely play to those senses if you can.
Mm-hmm. And with any of those drinks, especially for mocktails, making sure that you're using either a decent, like a low sugar beverage. So sometimes if you're needing to cut away from things like Sprite or ginger ale and using the diet versions, or if you're okay with seltzer and club soda, those are great additions to mocktails because they don't have the sugar in them.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I've told this story before, but one holiday meal in the chaos of
Mhm.
my family home, I accidentally replaced evaporated milk, believe it or not, for cream. So
Uh-huh. Yeah.
in creamed corn, and actually the recipe still with all of the other flavors that came into the creamed corn were actually still really delicious.
Hmm.
And so there was actually, I was teasing my family that there was a calorie savings there. So doing those kinds of
Or
substitutions are things to consider with dishes if we can try and make them a little lighter, if that's part of our intentions. So.
very true. And not to plug our upcoming events with the foundation, but we are going to do a whole session on swaps and some healthy food swaps with a food demonstration around Thanksgiving.
Oh, that'll be so good.
Yeah. I actually love the egg white one too, just to go back for a second, because not only do you save calories, but you increase the protein. So sometimes with a lot of the energy dense foods, it's more sugar and fat and not so much protein. And not only does protein, we need it for regenerating our blood cells and maintaining muscle mass, but it can be harder to get if you're not intentional.
Yeah, yeah. And then just that nutrient density to take that a step further with something like applesauce
Mhm.
in place of oil or even sugar modification. It is a little more applesauce that's needed with respect to sugar. So, and wouldn't do it for all of the sugar, but those are ways that we could just bring more of those great nutrients that come in some of our plants into our foods.
Yeah, and that reorienting to more vegetables. So when you have vegetables in your recipe, if you can increase the proportion of them, like for the stuffing, using more of the garlic and vegetables as opposed to the bread.
Yeah,
All great tips.
so good. And speaking of vegetables and
Mhm.
including more of them,
Yes.
oh, I think we talked about this weekend, like textures and
Mhm.
taking the type of vegetable that we're using and trying to modify how it's presented. There's a lot of really great ideas or opportunities out there for that kind of thing. So if it's
Mhm.
not just taking a frozen option and including it as an addition or something that's more available to the meal, think about ways to also maybe make it more interesting so people are inclined to try it, or maybe that you're more inclined to try it. So you might spiralize something like broccoli stalks or even shave it and do it as part of like a saute. Do some kind of medley that way. You could incorporate other things like fruit in it, if, like dried berries, if that was to make it more interesting. So,
And with the holiday season, I try to stay aware of this in my house, but it is a time where there's often more food sitting out, whether that's cookies or whether that's spiced nuts or whether someone's brought over some chocolate. Um, we know that what is in sight is easier to eat and pick up. So
Mhm.
having that crudité platter or spending some time when you're doing food prep, if you can, to cut up some extra fruits and vegetables so that they are also either out instead sometimes of the cookies or out at least with the cookies. And so it's going to make it a little bit easier to grab something that's healthy, grab those fruits and vegetables, um, as opposed to some of the more energy dense foods that surround us sometimes at the holidays.
Yes. And also just keeping in mind that sometimes fruit makes a good dessert. So
Mhm.
having that as an option too, it may be in the spread potentially that might be
Mhm.
available, or to bring some seasonality there. So especially things that are in season. So think about things like pomegranates, so adding those into a salad
Mhm.
that make it seasonal, but
Yeah.
are a great accompaniment with lots of antioxidants that we so need.
Yes, and soup as we get into the colder weather is a great way to get more fruits. Maybe not so much fruits, but definitely more vegetables and legumes in. The lentil soup is a great addition, and then really any other broth-based vegetable soups as we go into the fall. So uh, they tend to be more filling than sometimes even just like a regular dish because of the fluid, but they also can do again double duty to get in the extra vegetables.
So good.
Mhm.
And then that's another thing too. So if the day is getting long and we're just getting very hungry before a meal, I would also just say that's an opportunity to try and bring in a vegetable or even just a handful of nuts before a party, because it might just help the individual, depending on their intentions, maybe
Mhm.
curb that ravenous feeling to where we might overfill a plate and then try and honor the whole entire plate. I think that's a
Mhm.
really common conversation that folks will bring to me. So trying to do a little snack before the meal, so that way if dinner when you get there isn't quite ready, then you have a happier stomach on the way.
Yes. Great. Talking about limiting the red meat and avoiding processed meat. This is usually the time around the holidays that it it's harder to talk about this, but also easier to focus on why these foods may be in our diet. So they are celebratory foods typically. Like sometimes people are really they're going to have their ham on Christmas or they're going to have a special meal that has like prosciutto or something in it.
Yeah,
And so if that's part of your holiday tradition and part of your holiday celebration, there's no reason why you can't include that. But again, being mindful about other times. So if that ham is very special on Christmas morning, maybe that's when you have it instead of a ham sandwich every other day or every week or something like that.
absolutely. And then that new American plate that we talk about, with 2/3 of our plate being those plants, everything that we just talked about, those fruits and vegetables, try and honor that even when you are setting up the plate. So that's a good just balance in that space, to try and keep it truly balanced.
Yep.
Um,
And we
and
definitely
then
talk about just overall going meatless one day a week, but I think that's a really nice thing to do during the holidays, especially because it it can help slow us down and remind us a little bit about the balance sometimes that is missing from the holidays is that it is a time that we set aside days to reflect and celebrate, but we also set aside some days to be thankful for what well, to cut back on things that we might usually have in order to be more thankful for them.
yeah, yeah, good. And on the subject of a processed meat, but one that might be
Yes.
salty, like you mentioned with the ham, one of the ways that I
Mhm.
wasn't aware of years ago in cutting down on the amount of sodium that happens in a ham is to try and actually soak it in cold water. And that's one of the things that can actually
Mhm.
draw out some of that sodium. You would, of course, want to drain that, rinse that off, but that's a good option there to try and cut back on that.
There's a traditional, I don't know if it's a traditional holiday meal, but there's something that a friend of mine whose family was from Cuba made with salted fish. And she was talking about just how many times she had to soak the fish before it is tolerable actually for the specific dish that they're making. But um, I you're right, like soaking things that are very salty to get rid of some of that extra sodium is really helpful.
Yeah, even just other things too, like if we're using canned items, giving it a rinse before we use it.
Mhm.
I think of like green beans in a green bean casserole. That might be something there, to just try and cut back on that. And then also just looking for the lower sodium varieties that are out there, if that's something that we're going to utilize in our menu planning.
Yep. And I know that we talk about salt around the holidays too, because it is a time where you're usually having foods that you don't normally have. And the foods that contribute most to the sodium in our diets are prepared foods. not so much the sodium or salt that people add at the table. So certainly if you're looking to cut down on salt altogether, having that salt shaker off the table is a good idea, but you need to look at other places too. Um, when my dad was going through treatment, that was an issue, was the salt and getting sometimes the fluid retention that happened with that.
Yeah. And at our Survive and Thrive conference this weekend, I was actually just
Mhm.
talking at a round table about how that's a learned behavior. And,
Mhm.
just the folks at the table were also corroborating the fact that in that it is learned behavior, a lot of times when we are able to walk that sort of thing backwards, tasting something that would have otherwise normally been pretty palatable is like, wow, that's so salty. So it can be
Mhm.
done, but it is in slow incremental steps in that direction.
Oh, I love that people were offering that. It was such a great conference.
Yeah, it was. It was so good. And then other things too, like you said, apart from keeping the salt shaker off the table, but doing your own spice blends, right? So whether it's
Mhm.
your own, adding more aromatics to your gravy, or if you're going to do some type of well, Italian blend or a ranch blend, even like you can make some of these
Yeah.
spices on your own to take out some of those processed ingredients, like anti-caking agents, that kind of thing. But
Mhm.
also the salt, you can then control how much you really want to show up in the meal, and then maybe season as you need to.
Yep. And I mean, this may be a time, especially as we go into the new year, sometimes with the Super Bowl coming up, everyone does chili, and the chili packets sometimes
Yeah,
have a lot of sodium in them. But if you can do your own chili, cumin, coriander mix, not only can you adjust the spices a little bit more for your own taste, but you don't get the sodium.
absolutely. And then it's really just important, like we said at the beginning, to really try to be embracing nutrition. So, where there are some scenarios that are really just out of our control, I would just emphasize trying to relax in that, knowing that some of this is on
Mhm.
occasion. It's really, we always say it's what you do most consistently that's really going to matter in the long run.
Mhm.
So, just trying to have um, a little bit of a relaxed nature about the foods that we're consuming in an instant, like a meal
Mhm.
or an event, if that's the case.
Yeah. And I think planning ahead can be really helpful, not only for your meals and certainly incorporating these tips that we've talked about with having less sodium, having more fruits and vegetables. Um, and we alluded to this at the beginning, but the holidays, we tend to think that they're going to be one big happy time. And that's not often the case for a lot of people, especially around treatment, or people who are maybe a year or two out of treatment and looking at different um, things that maybe they missed while they were on treatment around the holidays or remembering previous experiences. So there can be some grief that comes up, some things that are are especially hard around the holidays. So looking at nutrition as a way to support you with that, being mindful of hydration, being mindful that there are times that may be a little bit tougher. And so planning for that, like planning maybe to go out on a walk with somebody or be able to have someone even just to talk to around those times, because we do know that food can be a temporary fill to some of those emotions, but it doesn't usually lead us to feel better than whereas connecting with somebody, doing something good for your body with physical activity, and making healthy food choices can really help support you in the long run.
Absolutely. And if it helps to honor some of those, especially if you're a person that's hosting, like giveaway bags, if that's, if that's economical for
Yes.
you, give some of it away, send it out, disperse the goodness so that
Yes, this
others
is the
can.
time of year I start trying to collect the little 16-ounce or 8-ounce Tupperware circles. And so
Yeah.
as for like Thanksgiving and Christmas, if I know I'm gonna have leftovers, I already
Yeah.
have things to send them out with.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned like people to confide in or to talk to, but even keeping
Mhm.
accountable, right? So if you
Mhm.
have somebody that you know is going to help you honor your goals or your objectives with respect to nutrition, no matter what they are, that's helpful. Even if that's somebody that's maybe nudging a person who needs to take on a little more, perhaps, or just to eat, just their feelings of not feeling well or how the season feels. If that's the person, that's great. Or if it's somebody that might go, let's get some more vegetables on our plate, then that's the person you want to try and buddy up next to.
Hmm.
Yeah, so good. And then bring your own stuff if you need to. So if you know that, I have had patients tell me like, gosh, I know when I go there, it's going to be like everything is creamed. That
Mm-hmm.
probably would have been my family's house. But showing up with,
Yeah.
a little salad to start the meal or something of that nature is another way to just keep more of that, um, nourishing, plant-oriented type stuff.
Yes. I've gotten in the habit of asking, like, can I bring some vegetables or can I bring, because often sometimes when people say, what can I bring? Or is there something I can bring? Um, it's harder for the host sometimes to think of what to tell you. So if
Yeah.
you already have something healthy that you'd like to bring, specifically offering that, and then that'll not only help your host, but it'll help you know what you're going to bring that's healthy to the event.
Yes. I'm always surprised too if it's just like a medley or a salad, just how quickly that goes amongst the menu sometimes too, right? It's like I've talked about
Um,
this before, but fruit infused beverages, even,
mhm.
I've worked in places where you just couldn't keep it stocked because folks were really drinking a lot of it. But I think sometimes we say it and people are like, oh, that's so boring. But in reality, it's so refreshing.
It is.
So very good. Well, this has been great, Karen. It's a lot of great
Yes.
tips and information.
Mhm.
It's great reminders, I think, for
Mhm.
everybody, really.
Yeah. And as we move forward, so we will be working with the foundation on a healthy holiday demo swap, um, food demonstration with healthy kind of foods that you can swap in for healthier choices around Thanksgiving. And then on December 18th, we'll also be coming back kind of at the end of the Texas Oncology Foundation holiday offerings and talking about maybe how some of these things worked. And it'll be a good time to reflect on if you've had a chance to uh, do something with these tips or put them into practice, and then how to either stack on the healthy habits that you've established during the holiday season or take this as information that you can tweak into healthy goals for the new year.
That sounds
So thank you.
great.
Yeah, thank you so much for doing this with me, Nicole, and we'll see you all soon.
Bye.
Thank you so much for spending the time with us today and for having Karen and Nicole share with us about embracing nutrition during this holiday season. We'd like to move on to see if you have any questions for the audience. Make sure that you email those to me. I'll have my email on the screen here. And just a little bit of a reminder that you are what we do this for. So thank you so much for participating with us today. This session was recorded and will be sent to all registrants in the follow-up emails. And it also will be available on our Texas Oncology Foundation website, but we'll be giving it to registrants first. Make sure to like our Facebook page, stay current with our foundation there. And just a heads up, we do have an upcoming webinar for the next 2 Tuesdays. So we have one coming up on the 22nd as well as the 29th. If you've previously participated in any conferences, virtual experiences, or webinars like this one, and you're looking to develop a deeper community connection, this is a group for you to join. It's called Mentors and Meetups. We will be meeting on the first and third Friday of November in South Austin TXO location for a workshop on card making. It's a gratitude card making workshop. This Mentors and Meetups program actually kind of unlocks a virtual private group that informs you on all Texas Oncology Foundation offerings. And then lastly, we value your feedback from our community. In follow-up emails, there will be a link to a survey. Please take a moment to provide us your thoughts on today's presentation and share with us topics that you would like to hear for in the future. Thank you so much, guys, for spending time with us today, and we look forward to seeing you next Tuesday.